Uh-uh. What it
Oh,
do, baby? Welcome
jeez.
back. Unfinished business. The final episode. No tears here. We know we announced though. I'm sure everybody watched it during the last part of the video because everyone stays to watch the last part of the video. That we were gonna change our name from Unfinished Business. Me and Malcolm being the creative minds that we have. Couldn't think of anything in 2 days, so this will be the last. We have it now. Huge spoiler alert. Very disgusting. Very disgusting. But that'll be
Very
displayed for next
disgusting.
week, Fantasy Friday. The what is it? Fourth. We're at the midway point of
Yeah.
Fantasy Fridays today.
I think no. Are we not?
Yes, it is.
Is this ending?
This
No,
is
I
the
think that.
second division. We did the South.
No.
Yes, two Souths,
Yeah.
and this is the second East.
And we did.
This is the halfway point.
Do we not do West?
We haven't done the West, and we haven't done the North.
We haven't done the West. So okay.
Yeah, it's beam of math, everybody. It's okay. Like it takes you
I
a
thought
while, but you get
I
there.
I
And
thought for
some like
sure we
you
did
don't
the West.
mess it
I
up,
thought for
but
sure we did the
a couple
West.
extra steps, and you're there. No
Yeah, my bad.
problems.
When I'm looking at these names, yeah, we haven't talked about a lot of these names, so that's
Is
correct.
there? Schmeckse. Oh yeah. So do we want to start off, or do you want
Yes.
to get into what happened today?
What happened today?
Oh, Malcolm, since you asked so generously, nicely. Yeah, I don't know if you know, but we're still in a pandemic. I think a lot of people are forgetting that actually that we're in a pandemic,
It's like a
but
trend almost, like a lot of things nowadays.
we
Like a
are
lot,
in a pandemic.
yeah.
And your boy went to his very first dentist appointment
Oh,
post pandemic. No,
post yeah, since the pandemic started.
there we go. Simpletons.
As economics English for you right there.
Okay. Ooh. Okay. So I had no idea.
Uh-uh.
The just That might be a new. Well, we're gonna keep it together. It's okay. 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 So
Uh-uh.
yeah, had so you know how we have like the families or a family, I should say. Like you're in your social bubble, I think is what it's called.
Yeah,
Like your
yeah.
group of 10,
Mm-hmm.
including your own.
Mm-hmm.
Are my two cousins, the one that came on, Ryan, and his fantastic brother Connor, the trick shot king, Connor Murchison. I have to say that because kind of lost. Whatever. They're included in the bubble. So got home from work yesterday, and under his breath, I didn't hear this at first. He goes, "Who is this waste man's?" And then he felt I didn't that up to like 2 hours later. They said waste man's, and he's like 14, the suburban. You're like in Ottawa terms to Toronto terms, he's like the Canada of Toronto, like that kind of suburb.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
and then we have a basketball net for our pool, so we play 2v2 basketball in the pool. It's disgusting. I'm wet, whatever. But
Well,
every time
you
we
should
got,
be in the pool, yes.
so I can't do that. um, every time I got the ball, it was ah
So cringe. Oh my goodness.
West Side Ting, eh? Man's is live. That might
Uh,
be the new thing. You might hear first. We're gonna be like the Washington football team. We're gonna say the podcast for now. The new
nice your
start
beak,
is gonna
love.
be not that. Mans is live. That might be the new start. Yep.
And
Coin
the
it
new
here.
response, nice your beak, buddy.
Sounds like some sick merch drops, if you ask me.
Sounds like Mateus Lovera Ortiz to me.
Have fun in JUCO. But again, back to dentist or
The
dentistry, I guess.
dentistry industry.
Oh, and like you're a child nursery rhyme. Very
Get
nice.
along with your story.
But I got an email about a month ago saying you have to bring this paper in when you go to the dentist. And it was like a 2-page waiver saying we're not liable if you catch corona, if you die, you
Mhm.
can't sue us, blah, blah, blah.
If you die, you can't
Just
sue.
push it under the carpet. But like the things they shoot, not technically shoot at you, but like the temperature thing.
The temperature,
That
yeah,
was the
they check.
first time ever happened to me. First thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it popped up SCXC. You know what that means?
What, sexy?
Sexy. Yeah, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I can't spell. I'm in Spimo.
Oh, but oh, it's tough. But yeah, like I had to wait in the wait. I'm not for waiting rooms. right now, it's like chairs like 10 people could have sat in the chair you're sitting in.
Jeez.
But had to flex the pants and the shirt so I couldn't sit.
The
Didn't want to sit, I
pants.
should say. But you were in and out, like there was no waiting because like I don't know in Ottawa, but they get backed up like crazy dentists.
I haven't been yet. I have to go before I move up
No,
there,
but you've
which will
been to
be
the dentist
next
before.
week.
You have to go. Like you've never been to the dentist in your life.
No, not once.
No, perfect. Man. But that's my story for the day, Malcolm. Anything exciting happening in your lovely life, minus the sick flow ski and the beard skis?
I got a lot of comments though from the members at the court saying, "Oh, one member comes up to me. It's not Movember, eh? It's not. It's not Movember.
Wow.
It's a bit early." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then I was decked out when the Habs played their first game against Philly. I was working that night, streaming it on my phone. I was decked out in the Habs shirt, Habs hat, Habs socks, and all these members. Oh, are you a Sens fan? And they're joking around with me, but still lost that game. We'll get into that later on tomorrow for the Saturday
Tomorrow.
episode.
Yeah,
But
we're
today
not
is all about
not lacking in content, that is for sure. Big 3-episode week for the boys.
huge 3-episode week, and
On
today
that
is all
steady
about
grind.
Fantasy Friday. Today's all about Fantasy Friday, and like Jay said, we're doing the AFC East, so maybe like I don't think anyone's fan favorite to watch this year will be the AFC East.
Well,
Obviously,
minus your
those
Bills fans.
minus the Bills fans because they're going to be very excited. But you're a Pats fan, you more or less hopped off that bandwagon unless you're a real one.
And then you probably hopped on the Bills bandwagon to stay in division.
Yeah, or just went to Tampa. But we're going to start it off now with our fantasy rankings for the AFC East, and we're going to start off with the QBs. The first QB I have ranked the highest, like you said, from the Bills is Josh Allen. Josh Allen last year had 3,089 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns with 9 interceptions at a 58.8 completion rate. Also, he also added on 510 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. So he's like I said before in previous podcasts, he in the top 5 for me for quarterbacks. They're all dual threat quarterbacks. So that's why I have Josh Allen at number 5, ranked at number 5. And that kind of like there's more dual threat quarterbacks lower end, but the top 5 for me, a lot of them can run the ball and pass the ball. Josh Allen, like you said, has probably the strongest arm, stronger than Patty Mahomes. So he's still young and he's still developing. And this year, adding some talent, we'll get into later as well, in the wide receiver position. But he has some guys to throw to, and he's got that big arm, and he can run the ball. So I think a lot of people are going to look out for him, and he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that obviously you shouldn't be picking a quarterback in like the top 3 rounds, in my opinion. But he's one of those quarterbacks who you should look out for, and he could be your starter this year and make a huge impact.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen has some huge expectations this season, let alone like obviously I think the Bills have huge expectations for this season from what stemmed from the offseason with the GOAT leaving. So I think there's huge expectations. I can use that word so many times for Josh Allen and the rest of the Bills offense. Josh Allen last year was fantasy's number 6 quarterback, despite being ranked 23rd in passing yards, 21st with only 20 passing touchdowns, and had, like you said, 3rd worst completion percentage at 59%, and 11th worst in yards per attempt at 6.7. But like you said, dual threat quarterback. He has the most rushing touchdowns for quarterbacks over the last 2 seasons with 17 total. That really shocked me a lot because you had Lamar doing Lamar things.
Yeah, and Deshaun Watson, but he was also injured the year before.
Exactly. And he's got some new weapons at his disposal for his receiving core. So him being a dual threat quarterback, I have Josh Allen 5th, like you said, in fantasy quarterback rankings as a high to mid-end quarterback number 1. I would like to see him maybe figure out his accuracy a bit more because I think he was one of the worst quarterbacks last season in terms of accuracy.
But he's young.
Off-target rate, I should say. So, yeah. But he's going to have I don't think there's much wiggle room this year for any misses.
No, not this year. When you're the heavy favorite in that division now after not winning the division since 98 or 97 or something like that.
Makes sense.
So
those fans are spoiled. Like everyone forgets they made 4 straight Super Bowls
and lost
them all.
Yeah.
Watch the 30 for 30 on that one.
Yeah.
On the tail, we moved the tailback position, and we got Devin Singletary, who had last season had 775 yards rushing for only 2 touchdowns. It's kind of shocking. But he had 29 receptions for 194 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. He overtook Frank Gore during the season as a top-ranked running back, so I think the number is going to be much more increased than what you're seeing last season for this season. During weeks 8 through 16, Singletary handled a generous 14.9 carries and 4 targets per game, so he's getting some more looks. But I don't know if that's going to happen this year with, again, the new weapons they added. He was 9th among running backs in scrimmage yards while playing 74% of the snaps during that span. And he was the 6th best running back with 5.1 yards per catch. So like you said, how you value dual threat players, he's one of them. So he might not, and I don't know if he's going to get much red zone looks, rather rushing the ball or catching the ball, because he's not a huge body at 5'7".
Yeah.
So I think they might explain the 2 or 4 all-purpose touchdowns. So I have Devin Singletary ranked 20th in my running back rankings as a high to mid-end running back number 2. And I like him as a high-end flex. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on Devin Singletary because obviously he's not a well-known name. So might be a dark horse.
Yeah, I'm at number 22, so just 2 spots behind you. And I would consider him for my flex position for sure. Like my top flex player, I would consider Devin Singletary. Yeah. But also, like you said, he could break out. Like he could be a very good running back this year and be a number 2 position for your running back position. But there's still a lot of other great talents above him that will be able to fill that spot, in my opinion. But we move along to the wide receiver core, and the wide receiver core for this division is just I'm not a big fan, but the Bills.
Well, you're going to talk about the best receiver right now.
Yeah, you have Mr. Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs last year, only 6 touchdowns, but he did have 1,130 reception yards. So, and that was playing with Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen injured for a bit of the season, right? If I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
So, yeah, so he still got a few more looks because of that. But still, he went off. He had a good season, and now he's with the Bills, and he's on a new team trying to prove himself. And I think he's going to go when you're on the Bills, and the Bills are the heavy favorite now. There's a lot of pressure on you, but I don't feel like this guy is going to have he's going to feel any pressure. He's just going to go out there, play his game, hit Josh. Hopefully, Josh Allen, like you said, has better accuracy, can hit him in more longer, deeper throws and be a deep threat, but as well as just a guy who can run after the catch as well. So look for him to pick up a lot of yards. Maybe not be your top touchdown guy, but pick up a lot of yards for sure. I'm at number 19 in wide receiver ranks. The wide receiver ranks this year are crazy. I would, even at 19, he could be your number 1 wide receiver for sure. So I think he's going to be someone who drops in your league, but you pick him up, he's going to be a really good number 1 wide receiver.
I think this is where I'm going to contradict you on that one, because Stephon Diggs is going to a run-heavy offense with an inefficient and scramble-minded quarterback like Josh Allen. So I don't know if you're going to get all those deep shots that you think you're going to get. And it was kind of, and obviously he's going to be the number 1 receiver, so I think he's still going to get 1,000 yards. I think it's going to be right at 1,000 yards, because I don't think he's going to get anywhere near for 1,400, where I think a lot of people think he's going to get, because you hear Stephon Diggs' name and everybody automatically thinks of that catch against New Orleans in the playoffs. So I think he's probably the most overrated receiver in fantasy this year. I think he's probably going to be the most overrated receiver. But with that all being said, he wasn't this. I think that the understatement of last season is that he was a disgruntled wide receiver being in Minnesota. I think he was asking for a trade all throughout the season, but he still played like a good man, because I don't like when people, I'm just going to hold out because I want to get traded. He played even though he didn't want to be there. So big ups to him. But if Josh Allen could figure it out and not stay in the pocket a bit more and figure out his accuracy and not look to scramble every time, Stephon Diggs should have a big year. But I don't know if I'm banking on it, because I don't think it can change what's working. They were a playoff team last year, so if it works, don't fix it. Yeah. So I have Stephon Diggs as 22nd in my wide receiver rankings as a mid-end wide receiver number 2. So I don't think he can bank on big numbers for Stephon Diggs. Yeah.
But Do you have any receivers on the Bills that you'd like to talk about, or you want to go to the
Oh,
tight ends?
do I? This guy had a breakout season last year.
John
Came from
Brown.
Arizona. Big ups to the fantasy god, for picking him up last year on the waiver wire, no less. It's John Brown, who last year had 72 receptions for his first 1,000-yard season and 6 touchdowns. Breakout season for Mr. John Brown after having some years in Arizona where kind of mediocre, kind of known for his dance move more than his play on the field. So he set career highs in targets with 116, receptions 72, and receiving yards of 1,060. Brown handled a generous 26% target share during 15 regular season games. So he was seeing the ball a quarter of the time, whether that would be running backs, or that would be tight ends, whether that would be other receivers. So he was getting a lot of the workload. And he finished 20th in wide receivers and fantasy points. So he had a great season last year. But I think production is going to be diminished this season due to obviously the addition of Stephon Diggs. But I think he's going to be the primary slot receiver in Buffalo. Have Stephon work the wide outs and have John Brown do his speedster, great route running as your slot receiver. So I don't know if he can bank on huge numbers like he had last season, but I hope he does for John Brown's sake. So with that said, I have him 41st in wide receiver rankings as this is a bit of a stretch, but a low-end wide receiver number 2 or a low-end flex because I think he's going to get a lot of receptions. Don't know about the yards, but PPR leagues, watch out for John Brown.
Do you think he's a sleeper?
I don't know. I think he overachieved last year because Buffalo didn't really have a number 1 receiver going into the season. So I think it was anyone's up for grabs. So going into this season, knowing that Stephon Diggs is your number 1 receiver, so everyone's got to know their role.
Yeah, I don't even have him in my top. I only have top 30, right? So I don't even have him in my top 30, and he's not one of my sleepers. So move on to the tight ends. Then who do you have for the tight ends in this?
Yeah, the Buffalo's tight ends last season had a good year, but the primary tight end for Buffalo was Dawson Knox, who had 28 receptions for 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. He played 64% of the offensive snaps, but judging from the offensive numbers, he was more of a blocker than a passer, a receiver, I should say. But the numbers could be related to Josh Allen's inaccuracy, who, from Dawson Knox's perspective, had a 20% off-target rate, which was ranked 9th in the entire league. And that led to an ugly 56% catch rate, which was second worst in the league. So with that taken account for, Knox still managed a respectable 7.8 yards per target, which was 14th best among tight ends. So hopefully, again, Josh Allen's got to chill out, take his time in the pocket, and just make a solid throw. He's got the frame. He doesn't have to worry about throwing over people because he's tall. So if he can just relax, take a chill pill, maybe listen to unfinished business before the game starts, be just fine. Well, I think Dawson Knox is going to be ranked 26th in my tight end rankings as a backup because obviously there's much bigger names to go out. There's bigger fish to catch in the tight end pool. So if it falls to you, if you like tight ends and backups, pick them up.
It's not even in my top 20. I have 26, and he's not in my top 26. Doesn't crack my top 26. So I'm not even considering him. I considered 2 Pittsburgh Steelers tight ends over Dawson Knox. So we'll get into that at the very final episode of Fantasy Friday, obviously. But no, I don't consider him to be one of my tight ends to look out for. Nor would I ever pick him up off waivers. I wouldn't even consider it, even if my tight ends got injured. No big deal, not a big deal. I'm sorry, not to knock you down, Dawson Knox, but just not thinking about you.
I'm sure he's listening.
But we talk about the kickers now, and I'm just gonna tell you right now, out of all 4 teams, I have 15. Yeah. I have 15 ranked kickers, right?
They're lacking in the kicker position.
I have 15 ranked kickers for fantasy because you don't want to look over.
No double dipping in the kicker pool. No double dipping.
Yeah, no double dipping, and you're not looking any further than top 15.
Mans is not hot in the kicker.
None in this division do I have in the top. I'll just tell you who the kickers is for Bill. Who the kicker is for Bill, and that's Stephen Hauschka. Hauschka was good in previous years. He's been like a
he's kind of washed
kicker.
Up now.
He's washed up and
had some great years in Seattle.
Like I said, we mentioned this before, I have Young Ho Koo at number 15, so he's past. He'd be past number 15, so I'm not even going to talk about him because Stephen Hauschka is. Just forget it. We talked about kickers. Maybe just brush off kickers for this division. Don't
I don't think so. Because they're all man rockets. So Stephen Hauschka had 22 or 28 for field goals, and 30 or 32 for extra points. this number's baffling. He was 1 for 5 from outside of 50 yards. So I think you could chalk it up to his leg getting a little old, getting a little long in the tooth. But he
I can't
makes the
believe we're
right.
talking about the kickers right now.
Absolutely. So, and he's, again, down near the end of his career. So hopefully they can win a chip for Stephen Hauschka, but I think he's already got one in Seattle. So obviously
Don't worry,
not a top
guys.
15.
Don't worry, guys. I'll put it in the bio to skip from this part to this part. At the top, I'll put some timestamps. Hey, you can skip this part. Not needed, or like you just don't need to listen because it makes no sense to listen to it.
But what you need to listen to
That's what I was about to say.
is
You
this
have to listen to
Bills
this.
defense, man.
Yeah, let's
Last
talk
season,
about it.
44 sacks, a astounding 14 INTs, an astounding 9 fumbles, and a measly 1 touchdown, which shocked me a lot. And they had 251 points against and 4,772 yards against. This was the Bills' second consecutive top 7 fantasy football season in 2019. So they're building up a pretty solid core with that D. They added Quinton Jefferson, Mario Addison, and Josh Norman, and they've already led with superstars like Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Jerry Hughes, Ed Oliver, and Tremaine Edmonds. So they have some absolute stars on this defense. No questions asked. And to add veterans like Quinton Jefferson, Mario Addison, and Josh Norman can really solidify this team. And Josh Norman's kind of he was washed up with Washington, so hopefully I think if fans are back, if they're back, Bills Mafia that helped Josh Norman's career so much.
But they also did add in the draft AJ Epinesa, right? And
Iowa
AJ,
State, Iowa.
Yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah, Iowa State, but he's also a good guy to look up for, a good ad for them. So I think their defense is going to look pretty disgusting. Where do you have them ranked for the defense?
Well, they're inside my top 2.
Oh, wow.
But not number 1. They are my second defense in my rankings as a definite high-end starter. Because if you look at this division, they got to play everybody twice.
Yeah, that's facts. And all the offenses are stacked. I have them at number 5, so still top 5 defense. I think 2's kind of reaching up a little bit because for reasons you may know already. But the Bills defense, don't get me wrong, they're looking really good. Tre'Davious White, I've been a fan of Tre'Davious White. I think he's, even before last year, like I knew about him. I don't think a lot of people knew about him or were talking about him enough. I'm just saying, he's been really good for quite some time, but since he was on the Bills and they weren't achieving, no one's really going to talk about him, right? They had a good season last year. They're bound to have a good season this year. They it's division or bust, like you said.
Absolutely.
For the Bills. So let's hope this Bills defense can help them out there along with their offense. But we move along to the quarterback situation back again. And this time we're going to talk about the NYC, New York City, the New York Jets. And the New York Jets quarterback, we have another young quarterback in Mr. Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold last year, 3,24 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, better completion percentage than Josh Allen at 61.9, 62 rushing yards.
And if you ask somebody who's a better quarterback,
touchdowns.
And if you ask somebody who's a better quarterback, everybody and their mother would say it was Josh Allen.
Oh, well, come on. That's no question there. He also had 2 rushing touchdowns, like I like to add. Sam Darnold, I think a lot of people are criticizing Sam Darnold a lot for many reasons because he doesn't have the tools around him. I'd say he does have a good back that we'll get into as well. Jay will get into, who wants to break out again this year, but he doesn't have a lot of weapons in the wide receiver position this year, and nor did he last year. So that's why he's not really doing a whole lot. But I don't know. I wouldn't consider him to be a starter, that's for sure. I wouldn't consider him to be a number 2, that's for sure. But maybe a low-end type, like a low-end quarterback to keep on your bench, or just have him on the waiver wire. Your guy gets injured, pick him up. I have him ranked at number 25 out of 35 quarterbacks in this league.
Well, thanks for boosting his spirits. I think he might have a better year this year because they boosted their O-line. Obviously, in the draft, getting Mekhi Becton. He's an absolute freak. Might end Mekhi Becton, so I don't think anybody's going to be coming off the edge on that guy. So hopefully he can get a couple more seconds for Sam Darnold to make a precise throw. But how you value dual threat quarterbacks, he is the absolute opposite of a dual threat quarterback. I think he has very little with his leg. But Darnold last year had 4 top 10 fantasy weeks. So, like you said, if you see a favorable matchup, you think you might have a big one, and what's this? Your quarterback's from the bye? Pick them up, because I don't think much people are going to be looking at Sam Darnold to be their replacement. But in his 8 of his 9 starts last year, Darnold finished 20th in fantasy or worse.
Yeah.
So you have 4 fantastic weeks, but the rest of his starts are very subpar at best. So I think they must be playing bottom feeders or something for able to get 4 top 10 fantasy weeks and have the rest of them being outside the top 20. So I'm going with this bet of outside the top 20 because he is my 28th ranked fantasy quarterback as a bench roll and or substitute for your bye week. But we get to your favorite player from a previous life.
Used to be.
If I can finish. It's the running back for the Jets. Came back last year after a little bit of hiatus. It's Le'Veon Bell, who last season had 245 carries for 789 yards and 3 touchdowns. As well, added 66 receptions for 461 yards and 1 receiving touchdowns. I think it was a very underwhelming first year for him in the Meadowlands for what he was kind of brought in there to be, an absolute stud.
Should have stayed in Pittsburgh.
But he ranked no lower than 11th among the running backs in carries, targets, receptions, and receiving yards. So he is in the better half. He is in the better half of the running backs. But I just think your name's Le'Veon Bell. Like, you're a perennial MVP when you're healthy and you're playing at your peak, right?
Yeah.
That's what everyone kind of expected.
But so unique of a running back.
He took a year off, right? So I don't know if he can just jump back into it.
He's so unique too. Like, people know, like, the time that he waits behind his O-line, just wait for that gap. But first, so
he was in Pittsburgh, right?
With that terrific O-line.
Exactly. So you could do that. You can't do that in New York.
You can't do that in New York. Yeah.
But maybe they can this year. Mekhi Becton might say that. But it's one player. But
it's only one player. But
ended up just 16th overall among running backs in fantasy points. Obviously due to a low production and touchdowns with 4 and a horrific efficiency at only 3.2 yards per catch and 5.9 yards per attempt. So he is your check down machine if you're Sam Darnold. And he did have double-digit fantasy points in all but 1 week of the season. So, I mean, if you want a solid bank of 10-plus points, Le'Veon's your guy.
He's your flex.
But has not played a full 16-game season since, you want to guess one? Please.
I'm gonna guess 2017.
Since 2014 was the last time I played a full 16-game season.
What?
Yeah, you can drool. So.
That's a long time ago. Holy.
Exactly my point. So with that, I'll take it accounted for. Le'Veon ranks 18th in my running back ranking as a high to mid-end running back number 2, or a high to mid-end flex in PPR, or not in every league, because he is a running back. So he's going to get touches on the ground. He's going to get touches with his hands. So again, dual threat running backs, I value them very high. So 18th for Le'Veon.
I have a number 20, so very close to you as well. Le'Veon, just come back. Should have signed the franchise tag with Pittsburgh. We do have James Conner, but I miss you, man. I know. Just come back. That's all I'm going to say. I miss you, man. But we're going to talk about the wide receiver situation with the New York Jets, and I'll tell you right now, I don't have any in the top 30. Yeah, I don't have any ranked in the top 30, and I don't have any sleepers. But I'm going to talk about this one guy who came out of college this year, drafted by the New York Jets, and that is Mr. Denzel Mims out of Baylor. With Baylor last year, he had 1,020 receiving yards, averaging 15.5 per reception at 66 receptions, and he had 12 touchdowns. So Baylor here is more or less one of your top guys, if not your top guy to throw to. You don't know how he's going to pan out with the Jets, but when you look at the depth chart, you have also Jamison Crowder, who hasn't been like a number 1 guy anywhere really, been all over the league, and the same thing goes for Rashad Perryman. So you don't have that you don't have that number one guy you're really looking up for. So maybe Denzel Mims can make a case to be the number one guy in New York. But if you were to pick him, he'd be a bench receiver.
Yeah.
He'd be a bench receiver or a waiver wire player because, like you said, you're not too keen on taking rookies because you're not going to know how they're going to actually pan out or what's going to happen unless they're like, Joe. No, we're not. No, we'll get into some that guy later. But
Sorry, good.
Denzel Mims. I'd say bench receiver, but he's the only guy for the Jets that stands out to me.
Yeah, Denzel Mims, I think, has the build to be your number one perimeter receiver. 6'3", 207, so he's no slouch. And as
Yeah.
well, off his combine numbers, he ran a 4.38 on the 40, which is very respectable, and had a 6.663 cone, which was best in his wide receiver class. He's pretty agile for being 6'3". But drops were a concern for him in college. In his 3 seasons at Baylor, he had 20 drops. So I got to clean that up. Definitely if you're going to go play big games in the National Football League. So, and he's not going into a great situation in New York right now because obviously Sam Darnold's there throwing the ball. And I think the coach, Adam Gase, does not have the full respect of his players.
Not at all.
So hopefully he can overcome those things because I think he's going to be a great player at some point. I think, you know what, he might be this year. I think he's one of the guys that could surprise people because, again, he's playing for the Jets. So I think Denzel Mims is ranked 58th in my wide receiver rankings as obviously a waiver wire player, but I think he got some upside. And he might turn some heads later on in the season because I think no one else is really that size that New York can have and just toss the ball up and win jump balls for. But more on Jamison Crowder, because I think he's a bit more higher ranked than you have him. He's last season had 78 receptions for almost 1,000 yards, 833 yards, and 6 touchdowns, which was good for 26th in wide receivers last season in fantasy points. Only had a 6.8 yards per attempt last season, but obviously he was more of a slot receiver, so he's not going to get the huge down the throw 20 yards every time. But he did have the 16th most receptions in terms of receivers in fantasy, and quite shocking, he's only had 20 career end zone targets. So 6 touchdowns in his career had 20 end zone targets. So he's doing it from outside of the red zone. So it's good for him. But I think he's Darnold's best weapon going into the season. I don't think Denzel Mims is going to have to earn that wide receiver number 1 position. So I think it's Jamison Crowder right now is his job to lose. So I have him actually 34th in my wide receiver rankings as a low-end wide receiver number 2 or mid to low-end flex in PPR because I think he's going to get a lot of receptions this season.
And Jamison Crowder, I've had him in previous years on my fantasy teams, and he's just been bust. This guy. So I don't know. I like you, Jameson. You're a nice guy. Seem chill. Maybe we could just chill out someday, like sit on the couch, watch some Rick and Morty or something. But I wouldn't pick you in my fantasy. No hard feelings.
Speaking of people not picking, you're picking in fantasy. If we get to the New York Jets tight end, actually, you know what? Maybe on the waiver wire, it's Chris Herndon. Only played in 16 snaps last season due to injury.
Herndon, not Hemden. Get it right.
I'm Hemden right now, talking about him. So, in 2018, Herndon was on the field for 63% of New York snaps, and following a slow start, was fantasy's number 9 tight end from week 6 on, and was 10th in yards for tight ends, in yards per target with 9. So maybe he can turn some heads. His 502 receiving yards was ranked 12th, and as well as catch rate ranked 12th. So maybe this could be a very quietly good dark horse. Not for the draft, but maybe for waiver wire. If he has some solid weeks, who knows? So I had him 24th in my tight end rankings as obviously a backup role to begin the season. But I think he could turn some heads if he...
Did I hear that correctly?
What's that?
Did you say 24th?
Uh-huh.
Jeez.
Why is he on your board there, Chief?
We got Skip Bayless over here with the cold takes.
Oh
my
God!
God!
Come on, Skip.
Come on, Skip. Jeez, man. No, I don't have him on board. No, sorry.
Sleeping on him.
Sorry to disappoint, but no, I do not have him on my board. But another guy I don't have on my board is the Jets kicker. I'm not talking about Sam Ficken. I'm talking about Brett Maher. And
Brett
this,
Maher, oh, what an absolute bust he was last year in fantasy. Oh,
yeah, he was. Last year, he was 20 for 30 from field goal with Dallas.
yeah.
So 66% from inside 20 to 29. He was 9 for 9. Inside 30 39, he was 6 for 8.
Yeah.
40 yarders,
outside.
40 to 49. He was 1 for 5.
That was
50
great.
plus, 50 plus though, he was 50%, 4 for 8. But he did hit a 63-yarder too.
Yeah, that saved some bacon the season, my season.
Yeah, a
But yeah,
63-yarder.
he was just.
So
If you could talk about flash in the pan, that was Brett Maher.
yeah, but he's still
Could
not
not
like
bank
we
on him.
said. Like we said, top 15. None of these kickers are top 15.
After last season, he's lost my respect.
Jason's
And
not a big
speaking of
fan.
losing respect, this defense is going to have to earn a lot of it. Because last season, guy turned some heads, but they had 35 sacks, 12 INTs, 9 fumbles, 6 touchdowns. So I don't know where they were getting that from. 6 touchdowns.
Who is
341 points against and 5,170 yards against. They finished seventh
Jamal
best.
Adams?
They finished 7th best last year in fantasy in 2019. I don't know if you talk about New York. I don't think defense pops out to you.
No.
But they allowed the 7th fewest yards and paced the league with 117 tackles per loss with 6 defensive touchdowns. But they have some huge losses now. Obviously,
Like you said.
very well documented that Jamal Adams is no longer a Jet. And as well, your best linebacker, C.J. Mosley, has opted out of the season due to COVID-19. So I think those were your 2 biggest playmakers on the defensive side of the ball are now gone. So Quinn Williams, step up, buddy, because it's your show.
Quinn's got. I was just thinking about his interview.
Bless you, thank you.
Bless you. Excuse you. Bless it. Thank you. Well, every time I think about Quinn, I hear Quinn Williams. That's all I think of.
Bless you, thank you.
Bless you. Excuse me. Thank you. And everyone's like, that's CT at its finest. But oh my, yeah, Quinn Williams can really step
Jets are
up.
not in my top 15 for defenses.
No, me neither. Not at all. But we're going to move along to the best team in football, the Miami Dolphins. We're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins quarterback situation. And obviously, we know who that guy, I think, even Bruce Arians of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers said, if I had this guy, like, he'd be starting for me. Other than if he didn't have Tom Brady.
Right.
But he said Tua Tagovailoa.
There you go.
He is
We're
going
going
to
to get this
be
name down before the end of the season.
the starter for the Miami Dolphins this year. That's what I think, at least. Last year with Alabama, he had 9 games played. 9 games played, 2,840 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, which was insane, with only 3 picks and a 71.4 completion percentage. But then again, that is college football again, so those stats are always way better than you see in the NFL because you're playing with the big boys in the NFL. Tua, not a big boy himself,
the big boys,
like in the height wise, but he's a pretty agile guy. He's going to be one of those guys. Maybe he could be a dual threat quarterback running the ball for Miami. But still, you don't know about rookies, and you don't want to bank on Tua being your guy, being your number one. That's for sure. So, and especially coming off some injuries as well.
Yeah.
So
Is that hip 100% healthy, you think?
Pardon?
Is that hip 100% healthy, you think?
I think it is. I think he's ready to go, and I think he's ready for the season, but he's still injury prone. You still don't know with these rookie quarterbacks how they're going to pan out. So for me, out of the 35, I have him ranked at number 30 overall.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's a terrific decision maker in terms of where he's going to throw the ball. So like you said, he only threw 3 picks last season, and he stays in the pocket a lot. He doesn't tend to scramble as much, so I think that decreases the chance for injury, especially he's only at 6'2", 217. So if you've got someone coming in at 300 plus at 6'6", like the monstrous machines that is the NFL defensive fronts, I think if you stay in the pocket, stay mobile, stay agile, I think it definitely lessens the chance for a serious injury like he had last season.
Yeah.
So he had a 206.9 quarterback rating in 2019, which was the best in college football. and his career QB rating at 94.8 was second best in his college career, only behind Joe Burrows for that span. So he's a good quarterback, man. But obviously it's his rookie year, so you gotta be leery. And he might even start off the season as the quarterback. You know, they're really high on Fitzpatrick down there. So, but the consensus is saying that Tua's starting, but you don't know for sure. So I have him 29th in my quarterback rankings as a benchel right now. But I think he could turn some heads. Some serious upside for Tua rather than other rookie quarterbacks that we'll get into later on. As I know you're a big fan of the number one overall pick, but we'll say that for the last week. You got the running back position who's kind of up for grabs for number one running back in the depth chart. First off, we got Jordan Howard, who last season had 199 carries for 525 yards and 6 touchdowns. In his career, he has 3,895 rushing yards, which trails only totals of Zeke and Todd Gurley for the most during 4 years.
Jeez.
So very underrated if he plays. But he is nowhere near close to being a dual threat back, having only a career average of only 5.4 yards per target / attempt for receiving purposes. So he is your prototypical ground and pound, run it down the middle, north-south back. So, and since there's competition, I don't think you could have him as a higher-end running back because you're not going to know how much touches he's going to get. So I have him 36th in my running back rankings as a low-end running back number 2. Maybe turn some heads, maybe win the job, but I think it's too early to figure that out right now.
That's for Matt Breida, right?
For Jordan Howard.
Oh, for Jordan Howard. Okay, so yeah, for Jordan Howard, yeah, I have him ranked at number 37. And I have him, I already mentioned the next running back, my bad. But I have him at number 37, but I have him ranked 2 spots higher than the next running back competing for the job, which, like I said, Matt Breida. So what do you talk about him a little bit too?
Yeah, Mr. Breida coming over from San Francisco had 123 carries for 623 yards and 1 touchdown. Again, crowded backfield in San Francisco. You had 3 running backs going out for touches last year? Breida, Tevin Coleman, and Raheem the Dream Mostert. So he's going in there trying to win that job. The self-proclaimed fastest player in the league. Don't add him. He also had 19 receptions for 120 yards and 1 receiving touchdown last year. He has not been ranked lower than 13th in yards per carry. So when he gets the ball, he's making it happen. But again, not effective as a receiver as he's got a dreadful 1.5 yards after the catch. So I don't know. Very hard to bank on for dual threat, which you value a lot. So I think Jordan Howard's going to start the year off as running back number 1 because I have Matt Breida 39th in my running back rankings. Again, low-end running back 2.
That's where like I said, that's where I have him exactly at 39th. So those two are competing for it, but I believe in what you said as well. Jordan Howard's going to start off as number 1, and maybe we'll see Matt Breida break out and fight for that number 1 and earn it.
Because he is the fastest player in the league.
He is. False. But we're going to move along to the wide receiver position, and I think this wide receiver is one of the most slept-on receivers in the league. I do have him ranked at my last spot out of my top 30, but still,
He's slept on, but he's way down there.
Hey! There's a lot of good receivers in this league.
Hey! Right? All right, Kawhi.
Hey! But this guy, I'm going to not wait any longer. His name is Devontae Parker. Last season, he had 1,202 reception yards, 9 touchdowns, and an astounding 128 targets. So he was targeted a lot last year as being that primary guy, other than we'll get into the tight end. But Devontae Parker being that number 1 receiver for the Dolphins. And I think it's going to be the same situation again this year, where he's going to be that number 1 receiver. Because when you're looking at the depth chart, if I get to it here, why am I on the kickers? I don't like talking about kickers. We look at the depth chart for their wide receiver core. They have Preston Williams and they have Jakeem Grant. And when you hear those names, you're like, okay, so Devontae Parker is your number 1 guy, and he should be getting double coverage every single game because he's able to make plays. He's still 27 years old, and I don't know. I think he's going to be very slept on this league. I want to pick him up for our fantasy league this year, honestly. I really hope he drops and I'm able to pick him up and snatch him because I think he'll be a good mid-end to low-end wide receiver number 2 or a flex player as well in those PPR leagues.
Yeah. But he had, like you said, he had 9 touchdowns this year. In his first 4 seasons with Miami, he had a total of 9 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
So to say this was a breakout season for Devontae Parker is an absolute understatement. He was fantasy's number 11 wide receiver last year, so had a great, almost top 10, but again, another great year. He had top 5 numbers in terms of wide receivers in routes run, receiving yards, and touchdowns. So that's your big money points. So I think he could probably get better from what he did last year. Because I think he's got that extra year behind his belt now, and he knows he can put up his numbers, so he has it ingrained in his head that he can do this, rather than his first 4 seasons where he's kind of really underachieved. So he probably have another good year in Miami. So he's my 32nd ranked wide receiver as a low end wide receiver number 2. But I think he could put up some big numbers. He could be slept on.
That's
like exactly
you said.
We got as well, Preston Williams is going to be the number 2 receiver for Miami. Last season had 32 receptions for 676 yards and 6 majors. Had a team high 7.4 targets per game last year, which was good for 21% of the share for targets prior to tearing his ACL in week 9. So that's why a lot of people really aren't going to be picking Preston Williams because he only played 8 games. And as well, he had 4 drops. So not hot. But this is a crazy stat that I found out. It was ridiculous that he had more targets than Devontae Parker before week 9.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So if he can play a full season, PPR leagues, Preston Williams could be your guy. But it's hard to bank on it because you don't know what's going to happen after coming off a crazy injury like a torn ACL. So I have Preston Williams ranked 55th in my running back ranking or wide receiver rankings as a bench role. Nothing better, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
Tight ends for Miami. We got Mike Gesicki, who last season had 51 receptions for 570 yards and 5 touchdowns. A lot of 5s. He was probably one of the only bright spots for Miami's offense last year besides Devontae Parker. He finished the season 3rd among tight ends in passing routes and ranked no lower than 12th in tight ends in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. His 11 end zone targets were tied for the most among tight ends and 8th in the entire NFL. So if he's getting as much end zone targets as we think he's going to get for this year, he's going to have some big numbers. But he had an abysmal 58% catch rate. But you could probably chalk that up to his quarterback, Fitzmagic, for most of it, having a 22% off target. And again, crazy style of the day. He is yet to drop a pass.
So he's like he's my guy. He's my tight end to really look out for in this for this year's fantasy draft.
Your prototypical security blanket, not dropping a ball.
Exactly.
So Gesicki is ranked 20th in my tight end rankings as a chill the fuck out. As a low end tight end number 1 with sleeper potential.
I have him number 13.
I was going to say, where's the reaction there?
And I have him number 13. I think he deserves to be within the top 15 of these tight ends in this tight end pool. He's very talented. He's going to be very good. He's going to be, other than Devontae Parker, I think he's going to be that number 2 guy who they look out for and get the ball to on the outside. So Gesicki, don't sleep on him because he's going to be very good and he's going to turn some heads this year. But we're going to move along to the kickers again.
Oh, yeah, baby.
And this kicker for the Dolphins is Jason Sanders, 24 years old, so still a young gun.
Yeah, come on.
So last year he
can't ruin his confidence.
He had a 76% field goal percentage, but he also did make 29 out of his 30 extra points. But he was 7 from 7 from in close from 20 yards,
Hopefully.
8 for 9 from 30 to 39.
And this number is great.
5 for 9 from 40 to 49, and then 3 for 5 from 50 plus. Also did nail a 54-yarder, his longest kick last year. He's still young, so these young kickers, they still got some gears to kink out. But
Not in my top 15.
like we said, not in our top 15. Not even going to bother bringing them up again.
And speaking of not in our top 15, we have the Miami defense, who last season had 23 sacks, 13 INTs, 3 fumbles, 2 touchdowns, 478 points against, and 6,384 yards against. Big ad, though, for Miami in their secondary, picking up Byron Jones. But
Yeah.
there really is not any other playmakers that can help them out. Like, big money you're paying Byron Jones. I think he'll perform for you. But that in the front 7 for Miami, it's really, you can't really mention anybody who's not front 7 for Miami. So I think it torn up in the run game. So they are obviously not in my top 15 for defensive player.
Me neither. So that's going to move us along to the last team in the AFC East, and
The
that
most
is
talked about team probably in the AFC East for
Come
all the
on.
wrong reasons.
Come on now, Deflategate, Spygate, the New England Patriots. Haven't liked them for a very long time. I still don't like them, but they did add a new quarterback this year. They got 2 quarterbacks in my top 35 fantasy rankings. First one being Mr. Cam Newton, over from the Carolina Panthers, former MVP. So last year, he only did play 2 games, had 572 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception due to some injuries. But in the year before, he played 14 games played, had 3,395 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, a 67.9 completion percentage, 488 rushing yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns. So if he's able to get back to that type of season and seasons before, then I think he's going to be your starter on New England. But they're not even confident that he's going to be that number 1 guy because you don't know what he's going to be like coming out of an injury and just grinding his ass off. No one else really took a chance on him. No one offered him any other contract but the Patriots. So we'll see what happens with Cam Newton. But I have number 32 out of 35 in my fantasy rankings for quarterbacks.
Really?
Really.
I think that his dual threat persona is going to be thrown out the window now. I think he's going to be standing in the pocket and throwing the ball more because of the injury history. I think that's going to be drilled in his head from the coaching staff. Stay in that pocket and not go out and venture and do what Cam Newton does best, and that's running the ball. But even, like you said, missing 2 games 2018, he did finish top 5 in terms of quarterback yard numbers in carries, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns. And he's done that for 8 straight seasons. So I think it's going to be really tough to say, don't go and do what you do best.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a matter of if he's going to overtake Jarrett Stidham for the number 1 quarterback position. It's a matter of when. It is. Yeah. It's a really matter of when. So not knowing when he's going to take over, I have him 34th in my quarterback rankings as a bench role to start. Because we don't know if it'll be week 3, week 7, week 9, week 11. We don't know. So we don't know.
And then obviously, like you said, Jarrett Stidham.
This guy must be loving the fucking attention. Like, you don't know, Jarrett.
He's just getting talked about all over the place. But some stats I'll pull out, the most recent stats.
Oh, there's a lot in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm just saying his most recent stats you'll find from 2018 when he was on Auburn. We had 2,794 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 3 rushing touchdowns. 3 rushing touchdowns with only one rushing yard. Can I say that? Which is pretty funny. So obviously just sneaking that ball in at the 1 yard line or inch line. But yeah, like you said, he's not. I think it's just a matter of when Cam Newton's going to take over for him. But he'll be starting. Maybe, just maybe, he breaks out and becomes some superstar like
Tom Brady.
Like Tom Brady taking over for Drew Bledsoe. So we don't know if that's going to happen. I don't see it happening. I think Cam Newton's just too grindy. He's a machine. He's a different breed. He's not Drew Bledsoe. He's Cam Newton. And that's why I have Jarrett Stidham number 34 out of 35 for my QBs this year.
Yeah, the glaring stat that comes up with Jarrett Stidham that he's only attempted 4 passes in the NFL. The glaring stat. So inexperience is definitely number 1. And I think he's got to be feeling the heat. Like, Belichick has said he's the week 1 starter. and you're saying no to a Super Bowl quarterback, an MVP quarterback, over yourself to be the starting job. So you have to perform, and you have to perform quickly. I honestly think that Jarrett Stidham is going to get more starts than Cam Newton this season. I honestly think that because I think they're not going to be that bad. Like as everyone thinks they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be that bad. So I have him actually ranked higher than Cam Newton, only by 2 spots, as 32nd in my quarterback rankings, just because I think he's going to get more starts. He's going to get more starts than Cam Newton.
You really suck, man. You really, really suck.
Well, after those positive vibes from Malcolm, we go to running back. And the first guy on our board, it's James White, who last season had 67 carries for 263 yards for 1 touchdown, but not known for his rushing. He's known more for his receiving, who last season had 72 receptions for 645 yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. But you don't have the check down king anymore in Tom Brady throwing you the ball. You know?
I'm just waiting for you to tell me what his stats are. You love him.
Mr. Checkdown and Tom Brady is no longer a part of New England. So I wonder if, well, Cam Newton doesn't do that, but maybe Jarrett Stidham could take notes off of Tom Brady because he was there last year.
And throw 5 great passes.
Honestly, I think that's why they're having Jarrett Stidham being your starting quarterback, because he knows the system. And in a year like COVID right now, I think it's going to be very tough for anybody new coming in trying to learn the system. And Jarrett Stidham knows it. So I think you give him the keys. Give him a little test drive.
The keys
and if
to
he
the
comes
city.
back, yeah. And if he comes back and a bit of a scratch, okay. But if he comes back and the fender's gone and the hood's all popped up and scratched, you give it to Cam Newton. But back to James White. He has never had a season with more than 94 carries, so he is not going to be anywhere near running back position anywhere because he doesn't run the ball. But has ranked no lower than 6th among running backs in targets, catches, receiving yards, and touchdown receptions each of the last 2 seasons. So if you're in any flex position, you would love to have James White. So I have him 35th in my running back rankings as a low-end running back number 2, but a mid-end flex player because he knows he can perform with the ball in his hands, not by rushing, but by receiving.
I have him number 36, so one below you have him there. Is there another running back like you'd like to talk about with this New England team?
We got the University of Georgia standout, Sony Michel, who last season had 247 carries for 912 yards and 7 touchdowns. I feel so bad for this kid because I don't think he doesn't get talked about very much. He's almost got a 1,000-yard season, and he has 7 touchdowns to his name.
Yeah.
But he doesn't like to get talked about very much. In 29 regular season games, he has played 37% of the snaps and has handled 54% of the carries, which adds up to about 16 touches per game, and 3% of the targets, which is about 1 reception per game. But last season, he only had 2 top 20 fantasy weeks. So in more of a pass-heavy offense with New England, I don't think Sony Michel can flourish. So I have him ranked 41st in my running back rankings as a low-end running back number 2 and a low-end flex position player.
I have Sony Michel ranked 1 spot above James White at number 35. I think Sony will be better than James White, and I think he will be able to find that number 1 spot in New England to be the number 1 running back. So you can doubt him. I believe in him. Still don't like him because he's on the Patriots, but
I actually have one more running back to talk about.
Whoa!
He is my dead last ranked running back, Damian Harris.
Okay.
4 carries last season for the kid. He lacks top-end speed, 4.57 40-yard dash.
Jeez.
But you know what, Malcolm? He's a good-sized man. 5'10", 216, powerful downhill running back, perfect red zone threat. I think he could chalk up some touchdowns for you. Not yards, but touchdowns. I think he has more than 4 touchdowns this season. Mark my words. Damian Harris. More than 4 touchdowns.
Heard it here first on Unfinished Business Podcast.
The podcast.
Soon to be. Yeah, are we going to be called just the podcast right now?
Yeah.
Podcast. Sorry.
But big news actually came out of New England's front yesterday. They did sign a 1-year deal with Mr. Lamar Miller.
They signed Lamar Miller.
They signed Lamar Miller. So he's going to have to fold in that situation somehow, but he's a 1,000-yard running back on his good day. Coming up with torn ACL, so fingers crossed.
Well, who knows? But does that mean we're going to get into some wide receivers?
Does it?
Because the wide receiver core not looking too great for the Patriots. I don't have them ranked anywhere, but obviously you can't go without mentioning this guy, and that's Mr. Julian Edelman. Last season, played all 16 games, had a right on the nose 100 receptions. He had 153 targets, which is crazy. 1,117 yards, average 11.2 yards, 6 touchdowns, and but he did also have 3 fumbles last year. So I don't know. That's his most fumbles in a season throughout his whole career. So maybe he's just getting a bit too old. He's been in the season since 2009. So I don't know. He's not ranked for me, like I said.
Really?
But he's still a receiver. He's still a receiver that can slip through the cracks, makes him heads turn, and just be that guy in a bench position.
I think you're sleeping on Edelman.
I think I just hate the Patriots.
Because he finished as fantasy's 7th best receiver last season. And finished in top 5 in wide receiver rankings in routes, targets, and receptions. But
ask me if I
obviously, do you care?
No.
Okay. Obviously, you have no Tom Brady throwing you the ball. And I think he was Fade's favorite target. So I think they'll be more run heavy than they usually are due to Tom Brady not throwing the football. So I think Edelman's numbers are going to decrease substantially. So I have him 36th ranked in my wide receiver rankings as a low-end wide receiver 2 and the low-end flex in PPR because you can't ignore 100 receptions from last season.
That's true.
But true. I got a couple sleepers on the receiving end for shut up, man. From New England. It's the Canadian N'Keal Harry.
Harry.
I love him. 12 receptions for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns in only 7 games last season. Injury-riddled. But I think he's going to overtake Allen for the number 1 receiver this year. Mark my words.
Here to hear on the podcast.
But again, I don't think he's definitely not worth the risk because uncertainty at quarterback. Like if N'Keal Harry was on your team and Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins was throwing the football, I would pick him up. I think he's worth a lot. But obviously Jared Slibbs will be throwing the ball to start off, so I have him ranked 50th in my wide receiver rankings. Bench player, but I think he's got some serious upside. But we got the tight ends here for New England, and it's very star-studded.
Who is that?
His name is David Asaisi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was a 3rd-round pick in this year's draft. Stands 6'3" at 257 pounds.
Big boy.
Big boy. He's got decent speed, though, for a 4.73 40-yard dash. So it's pretty quick for being 250 pounds.
Yeah.
And as well, only has 1 drop and 69 targets last season. But he's got to prove himself. He's not a top-end tight end in the draft, so I have him ranked outside my top 35.
Yeah, he's outside mine as well. And the same goes for, like we said, with these kickers. Don't even touch him from the AFCs. This guy, don't even know his name. Justin Warwasser. He's 23 years old, out of Marshall. Don't have any stats on him because he hasn't kicked a ball in this league yet. So we don't know how he.
You have to replace Steven Gostkowski.
Yeah,
He's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, who is a Hall of Fame kicker. So you have like big shoes to fill in, quite literally, sir. And you gotta be able to pound that ball from 60 yards out, man.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like we said, doesn't crank the top 15, so let's just move on. But to this Patriots defense, who is actually worth
who won them a lot of games last year. They're saving grace.
Yes.
Who last season had 47 sacks, 25 picks, 11 fumbles, 7 touchdowns, under 200 points against at 195, and 4,414 yards against. This was fantasy's best defense by a mile.
Crazy.
You know who the second best competitor was in terms of defensive points last season? In terms of the margin between the Patriots and the second best team?
Who? What?
34 fantasy points, separated 1 and 2. So they were first by a lot. But
they did get a lot every single week.
But they are losing a lot of high-profile players in this defense. Kyle Van Noy is no longer there. Jamie Collins is no longer there. Teron Harmon is gone. Danny Shelton is gone, and you have your COVID opt-outs with Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung. So you're missing your best two linebackers in Van Noy and Hightower. So Patrick Chung is probably, again, a very underrated safety in the league.
Yep.
He plays the Patriots. So
But you do have Devin and Jason McCourty, the brothers,
and
and
Stephon
Gilmore.
the 99 club machine.
Exactly.
So secondary is not an issue. Maybe front seven is. But I have the Patriots ranked 9th in my defensive rankings as a mid to low end starter.
I have them at 6th. I still believe that they're going to be, even with all these opt-outs and everything, that they'll still find a way to maybe scrub out a few games. I don't think that they're winning the division or anything. Don't get me wrong. I hate the Patriots and everything. But 6th, still a low-end starter. And if you like to have two defenses on your team, sure, but why?
Well, there you have it. We are halfway through Fantasy Fridays. We're done the East, and we have done the South. So we move up to the West for next week, and we're going to go with the NFC West, where it's probably the best division in football. Would you not agree? Would you not agree?
Yes.
Arguably.
Oh, I like the AFC North.
Well, because you're a bandwagon son of a nutcracker.
No, yeah, they have to. The NFC West
is the
has
best
to
division in football.
Yeah, and yeah.
No,
apart from like the Cardinals too, the Cardinals are still going to be very good this year. So
exactly.
there's going to be a lot of people to talk about.
In football.
There's going to be a lot of people to talk about.
But we're going to be back tomorrow for the weekly recap as per usual. And I think we're going to be called the podcast from tomorrow on.
I think for a week we'll be called the podcast. But nothing's changing on our Instagram or everything. We're going to still refer to ourselves as unfinished business.
Could you imagine?
I'm
sure it's taken.
Pull a straight Washington football team and just be called the podcast for the time being. No.
Yeah, I'm sure it's taken.
We're still called the Unfinished Business Podcast.
Against our will.
Till next week.
The lawyers are saying to keep it, so.
Yeah. You guys will be excited for this rebrand.
Absolutely. I think so. I think it's a pretty dirty name. So until tomorrow, stay woke, kids. It's Jacob.
And Money Malcolm.
This episode of Unfinished Business is presented by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free.
There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more.
You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership.
And it is everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.